Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. Today's conversation is really one that will blow your mindset about being human. What truly makes us human? My guest will be answering that question. Samantha Renke is an actress, presenter, speaker, writer, then disability rights campaigner, who was named as number 3 in the Shaw Trust Power 100 list of 2020, a list of UK's most influential disabled people. Her credits include numerous shows across the globe. Samantha is a columnist for the Metro, as well as having written for the Huffington Post and the Postability magazine. She's also featured in the highly successful series of adverts for the Maltons based on real-life experiences of disabled people, and her collaborative work with brands such as Amazon Prime Video. She's an experienced speaker, having spoken at numerous events around the world. Samantha is also an ambassador for Scope and a patron for Head-to-Head Theatre. What makes this conversation very fascinating is that Samantha was born with something known as brittle bone. She's permanently in a wheelchair, but she's never used that to stop her from pursuing her dreams. We'll be talking about the challenges she's faced as a disabled person and how she's finding her joy and using her platform to inspire others out there to find their own joy. But most importantly, she's released a new book, You Are the Best Thing Since Sliced Bread. This book will be coming out shortly, and she'll be telling her story about her disability and how she's found her joy along the way. Meet my amazing guest Samantha as she shares the story and hopefully inspire you to find your joy no matter what life throws at you. Hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. As I said in the introduction, today's conversation is for all of you who might be battling, what do I say, pain? Do I say discrimination? Do I say inequality? What do I call it? Whatever it might be. Are you battling pain? Are you confused about life? Are you worried, where do I fit in this world? Well, my amazing guest, she will tell you just where you fit in this world. She's a strong woman. I call her a fighter. Someone who's refused to give up. We're meant to have this interview in a venue, and she said to me, Anne, this venue does not have the right tools for me, so we'll have to do it elsewhere. I'm really proud of her voice, using her voice to find her joy. Samantha, how are you?
Oh, I'm so well. How are you? You're looking so glamorous. I feel like I've had such a long day already. I just said to you that I got someone. Very rarely do I treat myself, but I got someone to come and do my hair today because I was going to do some social media pieces, and I got myself so flustered that my hair was lovely, all pinned up, and then as soon as I took it out, I got so hot and sweaty and horrible. It just went like this. It just went like this. So I am good. The sun has now come out, but I'm well. I'm a little bit tired. There's a lot going on for me, which we'll obviously talk about. But I think this period of my life has been 10 years in the making. I think 10 years of me really kind of understanding where I want to be in the world. What people expect of me, how much I care about what people expect of me, and kind of finding what I really enjoy and where I want to be moving forward. So like I said, it's 10 years in the making. This is kind of the start of the storm, the calm before the storm, but we're kind of like teetering on the storm now. So yeah, I'm trying to every night trying to go to bed really early, and drinking my drink like green juices and doing all this kind of thing just to make sure I am prepared for the next 6 months of craziness, but nice craziness.
Absolutely, you do have a busy schedule coming up, but one thing I really find fascinating about you, Samantha, is that you are an actress, you're a broadcaster, you're a writer, you're a disability rights campaigner, you're a diversity and inclusion consultant, and you're also especially a keynote speaker. You know, you're all of these things. And one thing that also really defines you in a way, you said, we are made to think that what makes us human, and it's so true, our flaws, failures, heartache are things to keep hush hush, but being unapologetically imperfect, which is what so many of us are. Even though you look perfect, you might be imperfect internally. So these are your key words. You always emphasize them in everything you do. Lessons you've learned and why you embrace your uniqueness is something that I also have really admire about yourself, because you've embraced all of you. People who might not know, because we're looking at you through a Zoom, might not know their pain and what you've had to go through over the years. But look at you still smiling. Before we get started, tell me, who are you?
Yes, gosh, who am I in a nutshell? So for everyone who has, gladly come and listen to us today, my name is Samantha, and yes, I do wear many hats, but I was actually born with a very rare genetic disorder. The long word, which is a bit of a mouthful, it's called osteogenesis imperfecta type 3. Do not ask me how to spell it, because I probably can't. But it's more commonly known as brittle bone condition, which basically means that I don't have collagen in my body, type 1 collagen. So collagen can be found in our bones, in our hair, in our skin, and our arteries. And because I don't have that type 1 collagen, and I don't have any way of producing it, my bones are very fragile. Although I have other things that kind of can go a little bit wrong, but predominantly my bones, my skeleton, are affected. And I've had over 200 fractures throughout my life. I think I fractured in utero, so I fractured when I was in my mum's belly. When I was a baby, I was carried around on a pillow because I was so fragile. I don't know how. I mean, that makes me think that perhaps the reason why I'm a bit of a diva now is because I was carried around on a little pillow like a dog for some time. But yeah, as you rightly said, I suppose I physically felt a lot of pain growing up, and as I grew older, I recognized that actually my uniqueness that I always innately kind of liked, quite liked being different. I quite liked being the center of attention. And even if that center of attention came from kind of ableism or microaggressions or negative stereotypes of feeling sad or sorry for someone in a wheelchair, but I actually quite liked it as a kid. I quite liked getting the free sweets. I quite liked people coming over to me and going and interacting with me. I was always innately quite a spunky and confident child, but I think the pain that you were describing, the physical pain, pales into absolute, no comparison to the pain of realizing that disability, realizing that my uniqueness, something that I inherently love about myself, is a problem for society. And I think as I grew older, I realized that some people don't like disabled people. Some people see disabled people as a burden. Some people are afraid of disabled people, because they think, my goodness, that might be me one day. Some people want to, put disabled people down because their success intimidates them, because they assume that if you're disabled, you shouldn't or couldn't or wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. So there was a lot of kind of pain growing up, and attitudinal barriers, I suppose. We spoke about physical barriers. I know that where you normally film, I didn't have step-free access, and that was an issue. And this is very this is unfortunately, even though we live in a developed country, we live in the UK. Most places are still very inaccessible to most disabled people. But it's I think for me, attitudinal barriers and not feeling like me being me was something to be ashamed of, or something that I should feel embarrassed about. I think that is the pain that I would probably want to talk to you more about today, rather than any of the physical pains that I experienced, the operations that I've had, or the multiple fractures. I think okay, like when you fracture a bone, it's crap. It hurts. Like, it's rubbish. Yeah, of course it is. Well, actually, and I'm a true believer in gratitude and kind of being in the moment and understanding that maybe sometimes the relationship you have with your body, even when it is in pain, it's actually quite a beautiful relationship. So even in my darkest times when I was physically not well, but even in hospital, I love being in hospital as a child. I got loads of free Barbies, and like I used to be able to eat like ice cream every night and mac and cheese. Like what child would not love? What child wouldn't love that? So I think the pain for me is going from this very confident young individual to then being introduced to the world, and the world, whether that's other children, whether that's doctors, whether that's peers or teachers or strangers in the street, looking at me and making me feel like I am not worthy enough, and slowly over the years chipping away at that confidence, and ensuring that I do have internalized ableism. And I think, where I am now, I'm 36 now, and I am probably at the happiest I've ever been in my life. So yeah, so and as you can probably tell, I am from the north of England, and we do talk a lot. So yeah, I do apologise. Feel free to say, right, shut up now, Samantha. I need.
Yeah, no, Samantha, you're truly lovely. I think we just love listening to you, because it's just unbelievable what you've just said. Because on my path, I have an invisible illness. So you look at me, you don't think of anything. And I've been in hospitals, and I will leave the hospitals, and I will have to get my car closed, and people look at me. Why do you have to walk so close? Did you not go just visit a patient? And you.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh gosh,
And it's terrible.
It's terrible, the judgment that people put on everyone, because of people have this definition of what should be perfect and what shouldn't.
Yeah.
And even when you're perfect, what you're expected to achieve.
Absolutely.
You're expected to do this, you're expected to do this, and you're like, I can't do it. And they're looking at you. Why can't you on sports day? Why can't you run? Why can't you join the sports team? I just can't. So I understand where you're coming from. When you look at your background, when you were growing up you said you come from the northern England. What was it like growing up as a child? What was it like back in the days?
Yes. So I was actually born in Germany. So my mum's German, my father was British, he was in the army, and my mum was a nurse, and they met on the barracks, which is quite a cute little whirlwind romance. I believe that neither of them spoke one another's language very well, but they fell in love, and they had my older sister Stephanie, who is non-disabled, and then they were having a lovely time in Germany, and a very close-knit family in Germany. Everyone kind of it's very common, particularly in rural parts of Germany, for extended families to live together. So they were living with my grandma and so forth. And then I come along, and for whatever reason, I'm assuming because technologies wasn't as advanced, they were unaware that I'd be born with this rare condition. Now, brittle bones is normally a genetic condition, and it is inherited by parents or someone in your line. But my type 3 is a very different fluke. It's a very unique mutation. So it meant that no one in my family, as far as we know, as far back as we can see, no one had that. So I just it's just one of those things, complete fluke. And then I think our lives changed, and we decided to move to the UK. My father had family there, and we'd heard of the Brittle Bone Society, which is a wonderful society that supports people with osteogenesis. I was a trustee for them for 6 years. It was a real pleasure. And so we moved to the UK, and I had a happy childhood. I had a great childhood. As you can imagine, I was like this aged 5, and I think being around adults a lot, so being around doctors and constantly talking to adults, you can imagine I was a really annoying child, because I was like, there I was, like age 6, telling adults how they should maybe behave or act, like, have you considered this? Do you think you should say that? So no, I had a really good childhood. Unfortunately, when I was 9, my dad died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage. He was 38 years old. And that kind of that spun our whole family into disarray. And I think, again, when I talk about disability, and when you talk, about pain and our what we experience in life, people automatically would look at me, see my wheelchair, see my scars, see my visible difference, and think, gosh, her life must be difficult, or that must be the hardest thing in her life. But I'll tell you something, this is nothing in comparison to losing a parent and experiencing how losing the breadwinner, losing your father, losing someone who fought for you, because my dad did fight for me, although he felt, I think this is quite common for a lot of men, they feel a lot of guilt when they've had a child with a disability. This is quite a common experience. A lot of men really can't cope with that. And that is something that's very prevalent amongst disabled people in their families. Like, their families tend to break down. It's normally the men that really struggle with that. And I know my father really, really did struggle. I think he just felt guilty. He didn't understand why his child was born, like this. And of course, he was indoctrinated by society. He was indoctrinated to think that his little girl would never go to university, never do this. And I think one of the biggest things, the hardest things for me, and I'm not a religious person, but I do hope that, wherever he is, or wherever his energy is, I do hope he sees my success. And I think, my success, it has got a lot to do with him, and the fact that, he sacrificed his life, really, in my eyes, so young. And that was, for me, that was a kick up the bottom, to be like, I don't want his life to be in vain. I want him to know that his child has done more than great. She's excelled at everything, and she surpassed everything, and ultimately I want to leave a legacy for other young disabled people, and just anyone who kind of was told, who was labeled from birth, really. Anyone who has been labeled as not being incapable or not being able to achieve, I want them to, hopefully see me as that role model, not to sound egotistical, but I hope they do. I hope they do. And I know you've used the word inspiration, and I talk a lot about inspiration porn, and that's basically the objectification of disabled people. It was something that was coined by someone else who had brittle bones, an activist in Australia called Stella Young, and she called it inspiration porn, because she said that people have this tendency to objectify disabled people and call them inspiration, because in their eyes, if they were like you, if they were like that disabled person, they think that they wouldn't go out and about, they wouldn't dress nicely, they wouldn't have a boyfriend, they wouldn't have a sex life, so we need to stop objectifying disabled people in that way. If you feel inspired by me because you think I'm a great business person, or I've got great dress sense, or that I've got the gift of the gob, then absolutely. But I would never want anyone to look at me and think, gosh, I feel inspired by her because I couldn't imagine having a disability. And this is a narrative that gets played out. And I suppose you having a hidden, invisible disability, it might not be something that is prominent in your life. But I know a lot of people with physical disabilities, we'll get strangers come up to us, and I've had this on a number of occasions, say, if I were like you, I'd rather be dead. And this is why I talk so much about inspiration porn and how harmful it can be. Of course, everyone wants to feel inspired by people, but we need to understand that actually, our unconscious bias means that, we have a tendency to see disabled people in a certain way. When it's an invisible disability, they think you're a faker, they think that you're being dramatic, they think there's nothing wrong with you and you should just get on with it. And then someone like me, it's like, wow, you've gone to the toilet on your own, how inspirational, well done.
Exactly. I think you're really right there. It's that balance that we have to constantly fight and try to get our word across. Samantha, when you look at life, because I always ask myself this question: when was it that moment that you realized you need to take matters into your own hand and fight? I know you said you grew up in a very comfortable environment. You were in this blanket pillow all the time, treated like a princess. But when you then went out into the real world, you saw what the real world was like. Like myself, I saw the real world. When did you realize that I need to take matters into my own hands? I need to define my own happiness.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I don't think there was that defining moment. I know that you probably want this really defining moment, but when I say that I did have this innate sense of purpose, and also, we forget that disabled people have aspirations. I had aspirations. I come from a working class background. We didn't have a lot of money. We certainly didn't have a lot of money when my father passed away, and so there was all these kind of layers, these intersectional, layers of my identity. But I always just knew that I wanted to succeed. And I think I was about 5 or 6, and I remember being in my school, and I had this really big, oversized power wheelchair, and I had like these really big Benetton glasses. They're really huge like this. I'm sure they'd be totally stylish now, but at the time I hated them, and I cursed my mother for buying me these really big glasses. And I had pigtails. I remember exactly where I was. And I think one of the teachers said, I had my support worker, and one of the teachers said, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Samantha?" And I said with that hesitation, "Well, I'm going to go to university, no, college, university. Then I want to either be a teacher or an actress." And I said it like that. And that's exactly what I did. Like, that's the path that I went on. So I think, I always wanted to, support myself. I think maybe coming from a working class background, I understood the importance of money, but I don't mean that in materialistic sense, just security. And I think having a disability, seeing how my parents fought for money for a wheelchair, see how my parents fought for everything. Social care is not free. We're under this illusion that disabled people click their fingers and we get everything that we ever need. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We have to fight for absolutely everything. And I think knowing that, perhaps that impacted my childhood, but knowledge is power. So I think when I was a child, I was very aware of the reality of the world. Did it make me fearful? Now and again, but it didn't necessarily stop me from doing what I wanted to do. But I think I've always been a realist. I've always been a realist, not an optimist, just a realist. And I knew that if I wasn't independent, and I use that in a loose sense, because independence and disability is like a really tricky subject, because obviously, what is independence for people? Disabled people are often labeled as being a burden, and we're not independent. But actually, no one's independent. We all rely on society. We all rely on our friends and family and colleagues. So, but what I mean by independent, I mean autonomy. Have autonomy over my life. And I knew that the only way that I could have autonomy over my life and support myself, and even support my mother in her old age, I wanted that. I wanted to have that responsibility. I want to have children. I want to have, own a house. I want all these things. And I knew that I would have to work twice as hard as everybody else to succeed in that. And I guess, the drive to live the life that I wanted, and not a narrative that society had planned for me. I think that was the driving force, and that probably came from a very young age.
That's really true. I love that you said that, because you came from a family that were already working class. You saw everyone doing it, and no one. I think one of the great thing about your family is that they didn't put restriction on you, because some families, they automatically see their kids who are born disabled, and they already put restriction, believing that they can't get to that next level. What kind of advice would you give to parents out there, especially parents with disabled children who might not believe that they can achieve anything?
Do you know what? It's a minefield, and I wrote about this recently in the Metro. So I write for the Metro online. I have a regular column, and one of that was, like how parents maybe need to be mindful of not appropriating their child's identity. And we see this quite a lot on social media, that some parents who have maybe are new to the disabled world, in the sense of all of a sudden they have this beautiful baby, but they have a chronic condition or a disability, and they're like, wow, what do we do? And they they have a Facebook page or a Instagram page, and everything is about their child's disability. And sometimes a lot of disabled people just be mindful that you'll never know what it's like, but that doesn't mean that you can't be an amazing parent. But don't let those lines be blurred, because for me, I had quite a codependent relationship with my mother. My mother's my best friend, like literally my best friend. She gave up her career, she moved from Germany to be in the UK for me. She gave up a lot, but we were we are best mates. But there was a time where I wouldn't do things that I wanted to do, because I felt that if I was to go out with friends, or if I wanted to go and get a job, or if I went on holiday or did what normal teenagers do, or young adults, what would be the purpose of my mother? Because she'd given everything up to be my caregiver, my full-time caregiver. So we were in this really toxic relationship for many, many years, that I wouldn't do things because I didn't want to put her out of a job. She was too scared to let me go because she was still worried about the world and how the world treats disabled people, and rightly so. So we were in this really weird standoff relationship for a few years, and that's why I stayed in university for so long, because I kind of used higher education as I don't need to learn how to cook my own food. My mum can do that because I'm at university. That's what's important. I'm studying. Mother, you go and do that, and that works. That kind of works until I did my degree and then did a postgrad. I was like, oh, now I'm an adult. Now I need to, do stuff myself. And we had, and it came to a point that, I mean, it's more to this story than I'm saying now, but it came to a point where we had a very honest conversation. And I said, you know what? I love you and I know you love me. But if you continue having this relationship, if you do not let me do and be me as an individual, then I will resent you. And the worst thing in my life that I would ever want is to resent my own mother. I said, you go off, you do what you want to do, I'll go off and I'll do what I want to do. And our relationship has never been stronger. So I think my message to parents is understand that you'll never fully know what it's like to have a disability. That's okay. Encourage your children to, reach out to other disabled people. That's something I regret. I didn't have that influence in my life. I didn't know other disabled people, and now I feel blessed that I have a whole community of people. We're a bit like family. We don't all like each other. We don't always get on, but we kind of have a mutual respect for one another. And also, finally, don't lose your own identity in your children. Because they, at the end of the day, they want a mother. They don't want a carer. They want their mother there, and I think that's important. But also, social media, I know a lot of people don't particularly like it, but I don't like it all the time because I battle with mental health, and it can be a very toxic environment. But social media is a great way of understanding disability. So for disabled parents, or parents of disabled children, reach out to people like me, follow disabled people online. Instead of appropriating your child's identity, learn and be open to learning, and understand that that there's a lot to be learned. So a lot of parents tend to use things like euphemism. So language is a big part of disability identity, because we all deserve to be spoken to. We all deserve to identify how we choose and what language we choose. And I sometimes get a lot of parents, and this is not a criticism, this is an observation, and they tend to be like, oh, well, I prefer to use this euphemism. I don't like the word disabled, so I'm going to use the word handy capable or differently abled or special needs. And disabled people are going, hey, we're disabled. Just say say the word disabled.
That is true way to say. We just say it and stop trying to buffer the word around. And we're still here. You can change the word all you want. This is who we are, and we just have. I think it's better you learn to accept us as we are, rather than thinking of ways to adapt to accept.
Absolutely, it's about a conversation. It's about a conversation, and it's about understanding that your child has a voice. I sometimes see parents speaking on behalf of their kids. Irrespective of disability, I do say, but it's just be honest. You're gonna have some honest conversations. So the earlier that starts and that relationship, the better.
Samantha, when you look at the world today, and a lot of people talk about the accessibility, being able to go to places, being able to go to the market, but when you really look at it, you find there's lots of gaps. People are doing it, but not really doing it, because you try. I remember one when I had my daughter, and I was with the buggy, and I would struggle basic places. I almost dropped. My poor daughter almost fell out of the buggy because I was just struggling. And I'm thinking, what would people in this in their wheelchair? How would they get by? Yeah. What is your message out there to big organizations, small organizations, to try and incorporate it and make it more accessibility for people?
I mean, there's a few things that I want to say, but the overriding message is there is a law that protects against us being discriminated. It's the Equality Act of 2010. Disabled people fought for that law, and actually, what you are doing is breaking the law. So morally, we can be, thinking about disabled people. We could also recognize that one day we might become disabled. We could think that, it makes good economic sense to be more inclusive. There's a lot of reasons. 1 in 5 people have a disability. 15% of the global population has a disability. Anyone can acquire a disability. And I'm sure the pandemic has shown how fragile we all are. Like no one is, and I don't mean to say that to scare anyone or to shock anyone, but I was born with a disability, but many people acquire it. 80% of disabilities are hidden or invisible, but at the end, the bottom line comes down to disabled people have rights, and they are not upheld, and that is the bottom line. So this is why I talk a lot about stepping away from just allies. Allies can say, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist, I'm not ableist. I have black friends, I have disabled friends, I have queer friends. We can all be allies, but it's a very northern saying. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And we need advocates. So when I talk about inspiration porn earlier, like you can call me inspiration, you can come up to me and say you inspire me, but I'm actually going to challenge you, and I'm going to say, well, what have I inspired you to do? Are you going to come to Parliament with me? Next time you're at a venue and it's not got step-free access, are you going to say, well, why not? Are you going to challenge when you see someone who's waiting for a bus with a disability and the bus driver drives past? Are you going to be that advocate? Because we have a lot of tokenism, and I work a lot with brands and representation on screen. And yes, there has been a positive change, but a few years ago, a lot of my friends with disabilities, they were performers or models, and I saw them. I saw them in shop windows. I saw them, and that was great. But then I went into the store and I still couldn't access the cashier. So it's like, okay, you've got these wonderful disabled models and you're putting them in the window because it makes you look more inclusive. But are you hiring disabled people? Are you thinking about the purple pound, which is the combined spending power of the disability community, which is worth about 8 trillion globally? It's the largest untapped market. Are you doing it because it makes your brand look better? Or are you doing it because you recognize that I deserve to go out and not be discriminated against day in, day out?
That is the truth. That is true, because a lot of people, you see the big brands using a lot of black models, disabled models, and whatever it might be. But in reality, are you really making a difference in your organization, or are you just as a cover paste to sell the person walking by that I'm really doing it? In terms of work, and a young person starting job in a wheelchair, struggling, how do you encourage them to find that inclusivity to be able to get their work done, add value to the company, and also for the company as well, for it to add value to them? How do you balance those acts?
Yeah, and it's tricky because disability looks different for everyone. I think the expression is, if you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. We're not all the same. Our needs are different. Our lived experience is different. So going back to the civil rights movement, there was a motto called "Nothing about us without us," and that basically means that if you do anything that's disability centric, if you put models in your shops, if you hire disabled people, if you want to design clothes for disabled people need to be at the heart of that. We have to be at the center of that, and you need to engage with disabled people. I am a consultant. I love doing consultancy, just because I love it when people go, wow, yeah, I never thought of that, and I'm going to make a positive change. And I come from a teaching background, so I trained as a modern foreign language teacher. So I like bossing people around, and I like giving them homework, as you can imagine. What I like about the consultancy is, and then my message to everyone is, this isn't like we're not gonna change overnight. We need a cultural shift, and the only way you're gonna do that is to be like a sponge and take in as much information as you possibly can. I'm privileged in the sense that I get to speak as a keynote, and I get to speak to wonderful people like you. But I am one disabled person with my own experience, and I urge you to understand that, speak to someone with a learning disability, speak to someone who's neurodivergent, speak to someone who has acquired a disability. I like the learning should not stop, and that's the only way that we're gonna have this cultural shift, and we're gonna see positive change. I just want to say that my cat is kind of right just there, so if he jumps on top of me, I'm just warning you.
Lovely sight. You know, I love this quote of yours. You worked very hard on becoming independent because you said, I want a lover, not a carer. How are you managing to achieve this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, dating is difficult. Dating is difficult when you are a powerful woman, when you're a career woman, and then dating is different when you have a disability. And I don't want to tarnish, and I don't want to say that my experience is exclusive and this is what all disabled people experience, because I know many of my disabled friends are in happy relationships, are have children, like that's it doesn't mean that having a disability means that you're going to be alone forever, etc. But I'm also not going to hide the fact that I have found it difficult, for reasons that we've discussed already, like the practicalities of going on a date. Like how, like, someone might suggest somewhere to go for a date, and then you have to have that conversation of, oh no, I can't go there because the wheelchair won't go in there, and then do you disclose your disability? Because we live in a culture where we're very fickle. Is that the word? We're very fickle. We swipe away people that maybe have a big nose, that doesn't have the right skin color, that quick. And so I think there's a lot of things to think about when you have a disability. And I also think, I spend a lot of my work life educating people on disability. And do I want to have to do that with a partner? And it's difficult. I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult. And I have been on dating sites, but then you get a lot of like microaggression comments like, oh, you're so brave to be on here. Can you move your legs then? What about sex? Because men are obsessed with sex.
Yes.
And they automatically think that if you're disabled, you are non-sexual, you're often infantilized, So it's, to be honest, it's draining. And when you're a badass businesswoman like me, the last thing I want to do is get home at night and sit on a dating app and have to like go through, a whole load of ignorant comments. But I think it's a journey. I think it's a journey. Like, take my disability aside, I am a really fussy person. I'm a really fussy person with really high standards. So I think sometimes I set barriers up in my own, I set barriers up myself. But I think it's also important to recognize that disabled women are more likely to experience sexual assault. I know that I have, there's a lot of things that I don't like to use the word vulnerability, because I think that word got really misused during the pandemic, like labeling people as vulnerable, and it had this negative undertone that we were maybe not worth saving. So I use vulnerable in a light sense, but when it comes to dating, I do feel like I'm in a vulnerable position. I've been in some scary situations. I've been preyed upon by paedophiles because of my short stature. I've experienced a sexual assault. I'm faced with men, kind of wanting to objectify me or fetishize me. And that's a lot to take on. I'm not going to lie. Like, that's a lot to take on. And that's something that I am personally working through, because obviously you don't want to tarnish all men with the same brush. That would be wrong of me. But it's also about opening up who I would date. There was a long time during my teenage years that I refused to, associate with anyone with a disability, because people would assume that I could only date someone who's disabled. And when you're a teenager, if someone tells you that's what you should be doing, you do the opposite. Well, now that I'm in my 30s, I do now, date other disabled people, or I'll date any, makes me sound really easy. I'll date anyone, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, anyone who you go for any range. It depends if they like it, but you're not.
Exactly. They've got to make me laugh.
Yeah, you're not sticking to one box saying it's just
Exactly.
person or
But
yeah.
I think dating and disability is a hard subject to talk about because again, the media likes to focus on disability in a crude way. And I experienced that at the beginning of my career when I was starting in broadcast and media. All the interviews, I would say 9 out of 10 interviews were to do with sex and disability or relationships and disability. And there seemed to be this grotesque fascination with disabled people and sex. And I think there's a fine line between educating and objectifying and exploiting disabled people. So that was a journey for me. So I'm much more aware of that now, and that's why I've actually written. This is my segue. That's why in my book that's coming out, I have actually written.
Yeah, we're going into the book now because that actually was my next question. Was all about the book. So I mean, everything you do, Samantha, what really inspires me about you is that you just don't stop. And now you've written a book which is coming out, Fern Cotton, a powerful book on how to live boldly and love your fabulous self. This is something this is her quote from the book. And you are a guest speaker in this year Happy Place Festival, and you will debut your book. You are the best thing since sliced bread.
Let me grab the book.
I love this title. You are the best in the sliced bread. And this will be published in July by Penguin Books under its Happy Place book imprints, which will be couture by Fern Cotton. Yes. Wow.
Lovely Fern.
Congratulations. Congratulations again. And, oh my goodness, I love the book. I love everything about it. So let's talk about your book. You are the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, sliced bread. Why sliced bread? Why did you put the word sliced bread?
Oh my goodness. So it's quite a northern thing to say.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay.
And obviously, I worked with Fern before the pandemic, and I was supposed to be a guest speaker at Happy Place. And then obviously lockdown happened and everything went virtual. So I was still a guest speaker, but it wasn't quite the same. But myself and Fern became really good friends. We sent each other a lot of funny kind of WhatsApp notes to one another just to kind of keep our morale up. And we've got a very similar sense of humor. So I just became really close with Fern, and she's an amazing mentor and, if I can say, inspirational woman. And she just said to me, she said, like a few months after we'd met, she went, I'm doing this imprint through Happy Place and Ebury Books. And, do you want to write a book? And of course, if she says, if Fern Cotton says, do you want to write a book? You go, yes. Like, you don't say no, do you? Yeah. So I said yes. And then I went away and went, what do I do now?
You did. You did write the book.
I did.
If you're to look back at the book, I mean, it's out now. It's going to be out for everyone by July.
Do I just do that?
Of course we can.
Let's look at the interview.
We can. You're the best since sliced bread.
Yes.
What message, when Fern asked you to write this book and you decided to go back and review what you wanted to say, what message were you keen on getting out to the world?
Absolutely. Well, I think I already knew what this message was, but I needed reminding, because I think we always need reminding. Even when we're the strongest people and we think we're the strongest people, or we are living our best life, or we feel so comfortable in our skin, we still have moments of doubt and we still have moments of weakness, and we can still, go on social media and feel rubbish because you make comparisons with other people. And I think during COVID, even though I got given this really big, amazing opportunity by Fern, I felt really rubbish. I'd moved back up north to be with my mum because I was shielding. I wasn't getting in much work. I felt like before the pandemic, everything was going great, and then everything kind of went like that. And then Boy George, as in the singer Boy George, who I've weirdly I've never met, but when I first moved to London, we always used to be at the same parties or venues. And he always used to, I think he used to stalk me. I'm allowed to say that. Boy George stalked me. No, but he always, and I think he just had a lot of admiration for me, which is a beautiful thing. And he said, Samantha, I'm doing this new album. Would you like to record a music video? And the song was called You Are the Best Thing Since Sliced Bread. And I think Boy George giving me that opportunity, and Fern giving me that opportunity, and having two people that I've never met, two very successful people, two very genuine people, believing in me when I didn't believe in myself at one point. I think that's what drove me to really say, right, I need to write this book, not just for me, because it was like psychologically, it was like a therapy session for me to write this. You know, like reflecting, it's a memoir, so reflecting on my life. And it was really funny because I started writing about stuff and it was very emotional. Sometimes I'd be in tears, sometimes I'd be like laughing to myself in my bedroom, you know, writing. But it was very cathartic, and it was like, wow, so I behaved like that because that's what I was feeling, or I behaved like that because that person made me feel worthless. So I wrote this book because not only I think I needed it as a person, you know, to you know, re understand my worth, and you know, kind of go, Sam, you are bloody amazing, you are the best thing since sliced bread. But also I want other people to read it and learn maybe a bit about disability, because that's part of my life. But I also want people to read it and go, do you know what? I've been told, I've been labeled a certain way. I've been told that I can't do this. I come from a working class background. I come from a family that's not supportive, or I could, you know, like we said right at the beginning, I think that sometimes we all suffer in silence. And I always say that if I'm thinking it, then someone else is thinking it. And as you can imagine, I normally say what I'm thinking. and then sometimes it gets me in trouble, and sometimes actually people go, wow, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's been my strength, and I'm unapologetic in just, you know, being honest. If I want to talk about my wonky boobs, I'll talk about my wonky boobs. If I want to talk about the fact that, you know, I feel like, you know, I'm not good enough for men, I'll talk about that. You know, there's so many takeaways from this book. You know, I really genuinely hope that people pick it up. It's really accessible. People, those that have read it already have said, oh my God, it's like sitting down and having a cocktail and talking with you. Like, that's how it reads. And that's what I wanted. But you know what I mean? Some books I think can be inaccessible. Some books can be like, you know, like people start putting like fluffy words in, going like, you know, like making it all really posh, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But I didn't want that. I wanted people to sit there, you know, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever they're feeling, and I wanted them to, yes, maybe feel inspired, but also know that they're not alone in their thoughts and their behaviors and their experiences. And you know, I want to change also their attitude towards disabled people. And I hope I can do that in everything. But I also ultimately want them to know that, you know, they have worth, and their uniqueness and who they are, irrespective of that, is wonderful. And I don't mean that in a tokenistic way, and I don't mean that in a fluffy way. Like being alive is beautiful. You know, I've spoken about my dad's death, you know, like being alive, being you, being unapologetically you, and just doing what makes you happy, even if that is buying a goat and living in the middle of a field, because that's totally what I want to do soon. I'm going to get a goat. But you know what I mean? I want it to be fun, and people have said that they really laughed at the book as well. So yeah, it's a whole host. I think it's going to be something for everybody ultimately, and it looks pretty. It's a pretty cover.
I think I love the cover. I'm in love with the book already, so I can't wait for it to be out in July, so I can get my own copy, and then I share it with the rest of the world as well. You know, one of the things I love about you is that, you know, with everything, every challenge, you know, you face, you know, you have this brittle bone, you know, you have to use a wheelchair. You've never stopped giving. You never stopped doing things to inspire people. You currently you're a keynote speaker, where you speak at many places, and your subjects include things like mental health, how that impacts your life. How did the pandemic impact your mental health? Where having the coping mechanism of dealing with a wheelchair as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously just, told you that it was a big change for me. I started to doubt myself. I had to move back home. I moved back, like, as I said, back up north with my mum and my stepdad, and their house is not very accessible. Because it's my stepdad's home. There's no reason to make it fully wheelchair accessible if I don't live there. So I was kind of thrown back into that codependent relationship with my mother. And I think that brought up a lot of raw emotions. That brought up a lot of, wow, am I taking 100 steps back? So it was difficult. And can I be honest with you? The disabled community, like 60% of COVID deaths come from people with disabilities. And, the narrative that was played out on TV and particularly on social media was quite scary. And a lot of disabled people felt like they were pushed to the side. A lot of disabled people, all of a sudden, not from everyone, there was a lot of beauty that came out of the pandemic, and a lot of, as we saw, goodwill and how people supported one another. But even right at the beginning, there was a do not resuscitate on disabled people. Obviously that got changed. But even knowing that if I were to catch COVID and I would be in a critical condition, I would not have been prioritized, and I would have had do not resuscitate on my medical notes purely because I'm disabled. And I think this is another reason why I share my story and I create awareness of disability, because that's how harmful negative stereotypes of disability are. Because when it comes to it, your life is deemed as less valuable. And I think this is what annoys me more, again, because going back to the inspiration porn, it's like 1 minute you can call me an inspiration, and then the next minute you don't think I'm deserving of being resuscitated. Like, make your mind up. what do you want? What do you want? So I think everybody deserves to be treated the same, irrespective of our medical condition or disability, and our lives are no lesser than anybody else's. But it's not the disability, it's not the condition that disables us, it's the environment, it's attitudes, it's people thinking that we can't do what we should be doing. It's our place in this world and how people put value on top of our heads. So I'm not going to lie that is still something that scares me. And as we can see what's happening across the globe, but now obviously specifically with the war of Russia and Ukraine, I've not seen any or very little coverage on the news about disabled people. Where are they in the war? How are they being put to safety? And I think, for a lot of people in the UK, the pandemic was a precursor on how perhaps disabled people would be treated in a war. So I think there's still a lot of fear, and it's important to understand that a lot of my friends are still shielding. A lot of my friends are not going back to normal. We are still fearful of becoming very unwell, and I worry sometimes that the long lasting effects of mental health on specifically elderly and disabled people is something that has not been addressed. So I hope to create awareness around that too.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job. I totally agree with the mental part, because I myself, I came out of shielding, but I was very nervous about, because you hear the hospital being saturated. You think if you get ill, why would you think anyone is even going to prioritize you when they know you? You always have this thing in your head: am I a rotten apple? Why would they want to prioritize? You always have to build up the belief that you're worth it.
That's your internalized ableism talking. That's what that is. We'll knock that out of you soon. Don't worry.
Yeah. One of the things you do, Samantha, is that leadership is very important to you. I mean, in a lot of your keynote speaking engagement, you talk about leadership, about why it's so important. So when you look at your life, what does leadership mean to you, and why do you speak so much about it?
Gosh, I think I've been given, clearly a voice, and a voice that is relatable, and a voice that is, I don't want to sound like a politician, but the voice of the people. Like I said about my book, I want, my book is there to be attainable, and I hope that me as an activist, as a businesswoman, I'm attainable, and I want people to think that, okay, she might be on TV, but she's relatable, and that's what leadership is for me. To understand what life is like day to day. When I talk about disabling barriers, so we talked about, not having ramps, or not having, menus that are easy to read, or not having, altered text on your, social media or so forth. But actually, businesses need to understand that the disabling world extends to day. And the only way that we're going to have this cultural shift that I mentioned earlier is engaging and understanding what day-to-day life is like with a disability. It goes beyond not having a ramp. It goes beyond, not having the support in place. It is those everyday interactions. I mean, I had a takeaway delivered to my house the other day, and the gentleman that delivered my takeaway, he before giving me my food, he was just sat there telling me how God had cursed me, and how that I was insignificant in comparison to him because he was perfect, and we can kind of laugh at these interactions and think, wow, I can't believe someone said that to you. But these are day-to-day experiences of disabled people, or even just when I'm out and about and people won't look at me, give me eye contact, they'll look at the person I'm with like I'm not capable. So I think leadership is about, allowing other people to have a voice. And I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic, and I know that my consultancy work really shone, because obviously everything went online, and that was a positive for me. But I engaged a lot with other disabled people, irrespective of their disability or chronic condition. And I asked them, I said, what language do you prefer? Like, tell me your story. Tell me how I can be the voice for you. Because like I said earlier, I'm only one person. So yeah, I think leadership is about, listening to other people and giving other people a space to share their lived experience, even if you're that vessel. That makes sense.
Yes.
Like you are that vessel. And I hope I do that. I mean, I think human beings, we all have to be selfish in many ways. I am, my career came from being selfish because I wanted to safeguard my future and I wanted to have security. But I have also taken on this other responsibility of being a spokesperson and being a leader for disabled people. And I hope I get the balance right. I might not all the time, I might go into a very self-indulgent, part of holding up my book constantly. But I think we should also be proud of what we've achieved, and I think we should, and that's another thing I talk about in my book. Like, it's fine to look to role models, it's fine to look on social media and go, wow, their life is great. But we should also sit back and go, my life is good too, and I'm pretty good too. Absolutely. And I should give myself a pat on the back.
I think so. I think it's something we always neglect, is that pat on the back, thanking ourselves. And we congratulate other people, but we forget to thank ourselves.
Absolutely. I want a bit more of that. That's why it's called You Are the Best Thing Since Sliced Bread.
Absolutely. Samantha, before I let you go, final question: what brings you joy? You are such a happy person. Speaking to you has been, enjoyable. What gives you joy?
Pasta. Lots of pasta, a big bucket of pasta. And you know what? I've always had a very strong connection with animals. My father was a jockey, and he was a bit of a Dr. Dolittle. He used to, nurse a lot of injured animals back to health. And I have got 2 cats myself, 2 Sphinx cats. And the joy that brings to me, I now not work with, but I support, a number of animal sanctuaries, and doing a little bit of campaigning with cat protection. So I think that for me, genuinely, like, that gives me so much joy. And I think like anything, I want to be loved, and I want to be loved for me. And I think pets can do that. They look at you and they don't see your wheelchair. They don't see, if you're on your period, or you're in a bad mood, or you've got a hangover or whatever, or you've had an argument with someone. They just see you and they kind of adore you. And I think that's what everybody wants a little bit of. So yeah, that's what brings me joy. Animals and pasta. I'm a very simple woman.
Well, good luck with your new book. I think that book would do so well.
Thank
It can't
you.
have been out at a better time. So many people need to listen.
Absolutely. And I'd love to have you at the launch party if you would like to come along.
I would love to be there to support your work. And honestly, good luck with everything.
Thank
I
you, my
wish
dear.
you all the best and keep doing the marvelous work, supporting people in need, supporting people disabled, and also supporting people with invisible illnesses as well.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when we see you shine, we step up, even if we've just been through so many, surgery, whatever we've been through, we realize that we just have to keep going because this is the beauty of life and just have to embrace all the whatever discrimination that comes against and keep fighting.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you.